welcome. Today we are gathered to celebrate the publication of the new book, Letters Under Rock, written by Rinne and Thach. My name is Jessica. This book was published by LSR Press. LSR Press was started in 2018 in Redlands, California. It believes in telling tales that remind us of the joy of being alive, and it strives to provide a space for poets, writers, artists, both locally and internationally. So thank you to LSR Press. So our authors today that we have with us, thank you so much for being here, are Rinne and Thach. They are co-creators of Letters Under Rock, which is a collection of performance poetry. It's a discourse between two characters. You have a nomad and a wanderer. But before we get into the book, I'd like to do a brief introduction of our authors. Cindy, thank you so much for being with us today. Cindy is a poet, a performer, a fabric artist, and a teacher. She's the author of several books, and her works have been featured nationally and internationally in publications including Unpsychology Magazine, Anti-Hairy and Chic, and several anthologies. Thank you, Cindy, for being with us today. We also have Bori. Bori is a storyteller. He is an author of fiction and nonfiction. He is a poet. He has an MFA from Cal State San Bernardino, and his work has been featured or is forthcoming in Pacific Review, Urban Ivy, and Sand Canyon Review, among others. Thank you both for being with us today. This book is so unique and so special because it is performance, it is poetry, it is fabric art and visual art as well. It incorporates spiritual traditions and mythical symbols, creatures and stories, images, landscapes, and rituals from across the globe, from time and space. It's so unique. So as a jumping off point, I want to welcome you both and ask you about the genesis of this book, how this book came to be, how you met, and how did it all begin?
I'm going to jump in here because I'm the one that got it started. So
Great.
I was asked to be in a collaborative art exhibit by Conchi Sanford that was held in Pomona, and it was about collaboration. And I was asked a little bit late, and so I didn't have a lot of time to try and create some artwork, work with someone else, but I was creating art costumes, and that was something I was wanting to show, and she was giving me the space to do an installation. So I thought, oh, I could ask Bori to write a poem from the imagery on one of my costumes, because that's a common way to write poetry. Ekphrastic, it's usually, from artwork that's published and stuff, but so it's the same idea. And he wrote this fabulous poem, and the curator came to see my work, and she's like, we're going to have performances with the openings, and you should do something wearing your costumes, you and Bori. And I was like, wow, what a great idea, because I was already taking some workshops in drama, wanting to do performance. And so Bori was just such a good sport. All I asked him to do was write a poem. And then like, Bori, how'd you like to do a performance in front of people? And oh, Bori, by the way, you'll be wearing this crazy coat that I made. And he was so game and just kept saying yes.
That's great.
And we also had less than 6 weeks. We had like 6 weeks to write the poems and put the performance together before it happened. So we got to writing. So I'm gonna let Bori take it from here.
Yeah, what Cindy said is exactly how it happened. I mean, I thought it was going to be like something, very very small. Just, oh, hey, write a poem about how you feel when you look at this piece of art, this fabric art, this costume that she made. And of course I did. I wrote it, and it was like a one-page poem, and I sent it to her, and she wrote back to me like, wow, your poem it's so great. It kind of it speaks to me, and it actually relates to something I already wrote, in accordance to how she felt about the piece of work that she created. So she shared that with me, and we read those things, and we said, wow, there's something here. There's some characters are already making their appearances,
Hmm.
and so I thought that was it. And she approached me again and said, well, how about you? How would you like to be part of the show? And wear the costume. I'll make a second one. You could wear that one, and we just need like what 10 more poems. So I said, okay, well, let's see if we can do that. And so the pressure was on, and we were writing back and forth, corresponding with her as much as possible. So she'd write me a poem that day, and I would try to get back to her by that day.
Hmm.
Sometimes I'm a little slower than Cindy because she just writes poems, you know, it comes so easily to her. Like for me, it takes me a couple hours to even come up with something that I feel like it's usable, and then I would go back and read it again and make some changes. And Cindy, she was so great. She would tell me, oh, I like this portion of the poem the most. I think this is where the actual heart of the poem is. So that made me feel good that, oh, I actually have something. So we would strip away any unnecessary words or any lines that didn't really help or contribute to the poem or to the understanding of the poem.
Hmm.
So we did that back and forth for, I think we had a total of like 12 poems, I think. And that was pretty much the heart of the performance. Uh, I guess its infancy, it was like we didn't know what we were doing really. We just said, hey, these 12 poems tell a story. Let's put it together. And that was the beginning.
I love
And
that
we
you
didn't
just
know.
adventured together and
And
said
we didn't
yes.
exactly, and we didn't know that these 12 poems were just the beginning. I thought that was the
Hmm.
end.
Yeah,
I
that's
thought,
really wonderful that it started from a reaction to the fabric art, to the piece, and then grew into this dialogue. And I just want to point out before we continue that the book itself does feature some beautiful
That's the
pictures
one.
of the works that you've created, and I just think that's a wonderful feature of the book. Um, you guys have kind of naturally moved to another question I had for you, which was, and Bori, you just kind of touched on it briefly just now, but the process of working together. I'm going to go back to another point later, but what is it like to collaborate both on the page and then in a performance space? Those are two very different mediums. And were there multiple viewings of the performance, and then did that grow as the work grew?
We now have done multiple viewings of the performance, but at that point, that was our first time. But we both took a performance poetry workshop from Brian Sonia Wallace, and we actually wore costumes in the workshop. And for us, it made what we had in our heads real. So I think as we went into it, then we had, okay, this is what this is like in 3 dimensions, bringing the characters to life, and movement and interaction. So when we started, we didn't interact as much. The evolution for me is that we show our relationship much more as we kept performing, because we're supposed to be lovers intersecting from time to time. And the first one, we were very far apart because I was interacting with the art and moving around. But when I watched the video of it, I thought, no, we're supposed to be, coming together and reading these letters. And so that's probably for me the biggest change, is that our relationship is stronger in the performance. But as far as working together, that's exactly how it happens. We get the poem. We now have several performances, almost the whole book. Well, at some point we will have the whole book choreographed,
Okay.
so that we do different ones in different places. We did start a book tour, and so we will continue on,
Yes,
hopefully soon,
I hope so
and,
too.
and did some performances. And so I really like, like I said, Bori, I just kept asking him, but he now is just as involved in the doing the performance and coming up with thoughts, and he'll come back and go, oh, I thought about this some more. What if we do this? And so we've really taken on the personas, and we love performing. Our last reading was actually in a very old theater in Hollywood, and so we had the lighting and a stage, and I was just eating that up.
I bet the energy in there was just fantastic.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And
it was, well, I was gonna say, you know, like Cindy said, it was really like a new discovery for me, the whole performing aspect, because I just usually just read, you know, read a poem, read a scene from a dialogue, or you know, character, um, you know, that I wrote about in some sort of short story, or even a longer piece of narrative. You know, because and when you go to normal readings, they limit you to about 10 minutes at the most, and so you could do maybe 2 or 3 poems, or a very short, you know, 5-page scene or something from, you know, it was fiction. And so, and you just stand there and read, you know, try to maintain eye contact and just read slowly and clearly so that the audience can hear you. And then when you start incorporating performances, and you know, moving back and forth and interacting with each other, it takes on a different kind of life. For me, the words actually come alive and actually mean more. You know, they take on much more meaning than just when you're just speaking it or reciting something. Now you're actually interpreting it with your body, your movements. No, and I thought that that was something new for me, and actually very enlightening, because when I go to write a poem or even a piece of fiction, I'm thinking in those terms now. Like, how would this look like if it was in action? Or how would it look like if someone read this, not just standing still, but actually moving around, interacting with the audience? Because we did that too. We not only interacted with each other, we interacted with the audience.
Right.
And that was Cindy's idea.
Oh, I love that. So as you were writing these poems, this is the kind of question that just came to mind. Did you find yourself in the process of creating them, reading them aloud? You know, like you would a monologue or something that had breath to it. So as in the beginning, as you're writing it, or
yeah. I always read my poems out loud because I have to hear them, and the sounds, whether performance or not, I always read them out loud. Pace of the sound, that's how I edit. So I did want to add one thing, that when we bring in the performance, we also bring in Boris Cambodian, and so he chants. So when it says I chant something, we actually do chants. I do chants from the Kundalini tradition. He does Cambodian chants. So we have a lot of honoring. We've been told that we create a sacred space, because so this isn't something that's in the book. And so it's just adding little bits. I mean, it mentions singing or chanting, but then we actually do it. So that's where performance adds to what's happening.
Oh, it just grows the space even further with that layer of music and vibration, and you already have the words. I think that's really, really remarkable and wonderful. Do you have something else to add, Bori, on this?
Well, I agree with Cindy. You know, when you write fiction, you don't really you know, read it out loud or want to hear how it sounds, because it's, you know, a lot of times people read books, they read it to themselves. They don't read it out loud, as in like, you know, a script or you know, a play or anything. They just read it and it plays out in their mind. But when poetry is it takes on a different aspect, because people do respond to sound, and they respond to words, not just on the page, but just how, you know, how it makes them feel. So that's what poetry does. It elicits emotion, you know, any type of feelings, and even some words that you hear normally could actually take on a new meaning. And you know, you try to come up with something original, or make something more fresh, you know, that like a common phrase or a saying can take on a whole new dynamic with poetry. And when you try to do that with fiction too much, people get confused because they're like, because usually fiction is straightforward. You know, whatever you're saying on the page is exactly what you're trying to tell them. Whereas in poetry, there's a lot of underlining meanings. There's a lot of layers. There's more condensed, more compact. So,
Right. It's a
so
different
I
kind of narrative.
exactly. So I had to learn that, you know, working with Cindy, and I think it actually makes my writing much more enjoyable, and even the writing, for me, the writing process has become it has taken on a new level where now I'm not just telling a story, I'm trying to elicit emotion, you know,
Hmm.
and a response. So
Hmm.
I've used that in conjunction with my narrative now.
That's great. Um, yeah, absolutely. Also, there's with this work, you have an audience. You always have an audience as a writer, as an artist. You give your art and present it to another. But I just want you to speak. I know I didn't ask you about this earlier, but a little bit more about your interaction with the audience in the performance. That's really fascinating to me because they bring their own energy, and that's just really exciting.
I learned that at one of my drama workshops to also involve the audience. And I thought, this is a great idea because they're sitting there. And when you're a feature, you get more time. And so, like, why not interact with them? Which is one reason why I haven't wanted to really do our performance online yet. This may happen, but I really like interacting with the audience. I like seeing their response and reactions as we're performing. And, you know, I learned that if you can find one person that's really connecting with you to make eye contact with them. And so uh, it's just a wonderful thing to do. And I think it says, you know, we're honoring that you are there with us.
Hmm.
And it also, I think, helps to bring them in to the story. You're now part of the story. Our story is your story too, because they bring their own. And we hear about that afterwards when people talk to us. Oh, you know, I went here, I experienced this too. And of course, that's the best.
Yeah. Wow. Oh man, sounds great. Also, Bori, like most of your but prior to this book, you were writing fiction, creative nonfiction, which you create that, and there isn't really. I mean, you don't see your audience reading your book. It's very different to perform your work and then have that person right there experiencing it. Did that affect your writing or your
Oh yeah,
process?
it definitely affected the way I look at writing and creating more works of art, because now that I've had this experience with Cindy, and you know, our performances that we've done, and seeing how the audience respond, and we even have gotten a lot of feedback from them, because right after the performance they're telling us how much they like it, how they felt, how it made them feel. It actually gives us more ideas in the future for future performances, like what to incorporate. Because if this person says this and another person in another performance says the exact same thing, then we know that there, there's something there.
Yeah.
And so we did that. We, like Cindy said, we try to interact with the audience. We even she would rip the poems or fold the poems and hand them to audiences, just randomly, and they would take it. We were, when she was reading one of her poems about, you know, sing a prayer song, and then, you know, I would rip up almost like an offering of some sort,
Hmm.
like a burnt offering or some sort of a prayer. And that was, we would just, I would rip one up and toss it into the air, and I would fold one up and put it into my pocket to keep it like safeguarded. So it's like, and the audience, when they see that, they're like, oh, I really like when you did that. I didn't expect that. Or
Yeah.
how you or you rip one of them up and the other one you fold it and put it away. It lends more meaning, and it makes the audience think. And now they're interacting with us in their own way, even if they're not physically or talking to us or anything. They're now a part of the performance. They've been taken in.
And they're witnessed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when I write, I do that. I think, oh well, if I wrote this scene or this, or I say this phrase or this piece of dialogue, I really want to elicit some kind of response from the audience. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, this is wonderful. I want to point out again that in the book, in addition to the poetry, you will also see there are images from the performance, which can give the reader an idea and spark the imagination of what that's like.
So real
Um,
quickly, I would like
mhm.
to thank Edwin Vasquez for taking those
Oh
pictures,
yes,
and the Museum of Art and History in Lancaster for giving us a stage and a wonderful place to perform. So those both came together so that we had the images for the book.
that's wonderful. Yes, thank you. Um, so Letters Under Rock, it's two characters, two lovers. You have a nomad and you have a wanderer. Bori, you are the nomad, and Cindy, you are the wanderer. I'd like you to give the listeners a description of who, like Cindy, who is the wanderer? And then also how, maybe start there, that you can both describe your characters. But then from there, I'd like to hear you talk about each other. If, I don't know.
Okay, the Wanderer. I liked being the Wanderer because I can go anywhere. But as I was working on the poems, I felt guided to go to certain places and not others. So I was very careful and particular about where I went. I also turn into animals because I can. So I'm a moth and I'm different things. I was able to bring in rituals, uh, you know, that I made up somewhat, but based on, felt very real, could happen. And as far as our relationship, he's my lover. So there's just this longing, like I don't get to see him very often. And we try to really bring that longing into the performance. And he also, brought in his culture and some spiritual beliefs and even plants and animals that were new to me. So to respond to these, I would dig into other cultures and bring in maybe something I wouldn't normally write about. And I loved, we haven't talked about this, letters back and forth. I couldn't wait to open the next one. What is he going to do? Where is he going to go? What is he going to say? And so really there was even kind of a longing to get the next letter.
Oh, wow.
And so he uh, was able to portray, different things than I did, different ideas and concepts that stretched me and expanded as a wanderer, even more expansion.
Wonderful. Thank you. Bori?
Yes, that is who I am in the book, and I I felt like the nomad spoke to me because of the very first poem in the book. If you see, it's the poem Seasons, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the poem that opens the book, and that was the actual poem that was in response to Cindy's costume.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was writing that, I felt like this character kind of made itself known to me, and he's this traveling nomad on kind of a spiritual journey of some sort, but he's looking for somebody. He calls her, the goddess in there. He calls her, he describes her very, very well in terms of kind of her divine nature, but also her very human aspects.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like that was that was the wanderer that he was talking about. And as the book progresses, you can see that these characters take on new identity. They evolve. They become much more than what they were at the beginning. Cindy takes on new bodies, and she was a moth, and then she's a phoenix, and
Yeah.
I'm becoming all sorts of different animals as well, and taking on
Yeah.
different life, and during different lifetimes, we kind of go on a spiritual evolution, and we travel through different realms, different lifetimes, different worlds, and but it's all because we're searching for one another. And I feel like when you read it, you can read it from, you can start anywhere, you don't have to be starting from page 1. You can start page 10, or uh, even the chapters themselves. I feel like you can even move them around, and the poems. I feel like it's so fluid in that way. Like, and I was telling Cindy, even when we met, last few days ago, on the weekend. Uh, every time I read it, it's like I'm reading it for the first time again,
Yeah.
because we're always finding out something new. Something else is standing out to us. Something else that we didn't really uh, take notice has now become more important. You know, and I feel like in a way we're all like a nomad and a wanderer. All of us. We're all on that same journey of self-discovery, trying to find out who we are, but also looking for that person that we're just searching for. And in this case, we actually find each other, and we take off, and in many ways, we're not we have transcended the physical and the physical body, and now we've become something much more.
This book is definitely all the things that you said regarding, the searching and the journey and the self-discovery. And that is in no way a straight line, right? There's not one way to do that. And you yourself are not one thing as you make that journey. At least that's what I believe. And I think this book really shows that as well, which leads me to kind of what you touched on. But because this book has so many dimensions, the poetry, the performance, and that idea of journey, what would you recommend to the readers in terms of how to, or any suggestions to approach the book? Bora, you mentioned that you can kind of open it up at any point and begin. Yeah.
I think that when you read the book, you just have to have an open mind. Like, it doesn't have, because it deals with different cultures, different regions of the world, different beliefs and practices. So even if you're not a part of that, you can still, in a way, see and feel how people from that part of the world, or people who, um, you know, perform these rituals that we are performing in the book. You can see what it means and what's the purpose behind it. And when we were performing together, Cindy and I would talk. Well, in this part of the poem, we can actually do a prayer song. We can actually do a ritual chant, even though it's not in the book, but it comes through in performance.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the performances that we've done has added more to the book itself. So on the page, you see what's going on, but in the performances, it takes you to another level, and like I said, it transcends the whole thing, and you see the transformation that we go through.
Cindy, do you have something to add on that?
Just a little. I just would ask the reader to allow themselves the freedom to journey with us. Just kind of let things go, and let's go with us, and trust our voices, because they will find their own within the story somewhere. And so bringing themselves into it too might remind them of something. I mean, we refer to childhood, all different stages of life. So memories should come to people, or it may just tie in with where they are on the journey. And so, because I like seeing something written and go, oh yes, that's me. That's where I am. That's what I'm doing. And it just helps give form to that, because we have ideas and kind of know we want to go here or there, but to see it on a page and go, okay, someone else wrote this down, but this is really how I'm feeling today. I mean, sometimes we talk about forgiveness, there's pain, there's sorrow, there's happy, there's joy. I mean, there's a lot of emotions in here too. And so even tapping into that, but really just allowing yourself to just go on this like Bori said, we're in all kinds of levels and spheres, and just go with us and see what happens.
Yeah. Jump in, take the adventure.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, because you were mentioning the letters. I'm curious. Did you, okay, first, this is a very physical question, but did you handwrite them and send them to each other initially, or did you email them to each other and that's how you received? Like Cindy, you spoke about like so excited about opening that next letter, the longing with that. I just wondered, how did you get them? What was that? What did that look like?
Well, I think for the most part, a lot of the poems were written in that order. But we did make some slight changes. For instance, like I think the first 12 we wrote, which was the first initial original performance piece. We went back. We were like, well, if we continue on, it's going to be like a full-on book. So let's keep
Yeah.
going. And we did. And then we realized, wow, actually, this new poem, could fit right in the middle of the original 12. Because when you look at, if you would have been at the Progress Gallery in Pomona, the first 12 poems is almost like a very condensed version of our book because it had elements of everything that you see throughout the book, but just squeezed into 12 poems. So it's like it still accomplished what we set out to do, which is to tell that story. But when we went on and said, well, we have to write at least 20 or 30 more poems, we had to kind of elaborate on the story. So instead of shortening it to 12 poems, we expanded it to about 50 poems. And we after we got all the poems written, because with the correspondence between each other, we kind of sat down. We sat down. I had printed all the poems. She printed all the poems. We sat down, went through all of them, and read them. And then we said, well, how do you feel about this poem? Does this poem seem to be following the theme or the story arc, so to speak? And we did move some around and say, well, this one actually goes better with this poem. But this poem uh, speaks to this poem that we wrote, 2 weeks ago. And we did that, and we just kind of moved it around, based on how we felt. So instead of just, we didn't really look at it in the surface level and see, oh, this poem is long, this poem is short. We said, well, this poem talks about this, and this poem talks about that, and that's how we were really guided towards the organizational process and the formatting. And I love the pictures in there. The pictures in there, I think, really helped um, solidify the story. And even with the performances, it captures what we did in the whole performance, even though they are only little glimpses, like a snapshot of what we were doing there. But throughout the book, it kind of guides the reader and shows them what we were doing, in terms of interacting with each other and performing on stage. The
Yeah.
pictures actually spoke in a way, spoke for us.
Yeah. I agree. This book is really remarkable, and again, we're talking about Letters Under Rock, and we have Cindy, Rinne, and Bori Thach here. I look forward to the day in the future, hopefully not too far away, when the world is safe, to see this performance again.
Yes.
But until then, I highly recommend picking up a copy of this. Cindy and Bori, I'm so happy that I got to speak with you today. If there's anything else you'd like to add, love to hear it. Yeah, thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you. We appreciate it. It was our pleasure.
Yes, thank you. And I want to mention there's also an ebook available. So we have two forms.
Yes.
Wonderful.
The printed and the ebooks, so that they have a choice. People have a choice on how they want to experience the book. And I just
those
thank you so much.
Can both be picked up either through the press directly or through Amazon, I believe.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Thank you. You're a great interviewer.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for listening.